Hey everybody. Drop me a little note in the chat if you can hear me okay. Like, is the volume all right? Are you getting any echoes? I want to make sure our sound is good before we get started. And I believe everybody is on mute, so if you can just drop me a note in the chat. Okay, good. You guys can hear me. Sounds good. Thank you. I'm going to tell you guys a secret. Oh, no secret. Secret for later. I'll just give it 1 or 2 more minutes. We've got close to 50 people signed up for the webinar, and you might notice right now we only have 10 on. So I'm just going to give it a few. I know 5 o'clock might be a hard time for some people because you're just getting off of work. I know that's just when I usually get off of work. Hi, Victoria. Victoria is one of our groupies. She's always supporting us. That's the secret. There's another groupie on here, Carol. Hi, Carol. Carol's also a groupie. We appreciate her too. I don't think I've had the pleasure of meeting anybody else. You know, if you're familiar with Healthy Habits Living, you know that if you buy product from us, I'm always happy to give you a free consultation about the product. And so I'm looking to see if I recognize any of these names of people that I've talked to on the phone, but I don't recognize anybody other than Carol or Victoria. So everybody should be on mute. I'm not hearing anybody except for myself. And if you're new to Zoom, usually if you scroll down and hover your arrow or your mouse over the bottom left-hand side of your screen, a little menu will pop up, and that's where the microphone should be. And if you do that now, you'll probably see that you're on mute. So please stay on mute so that everyone can hear and we don't get a lot of background noise. And then you'll also notice on that toolbar or that menu that comes up, there's a Q&A. And so you are welcome to put your questions in there. I won't be answering questions as we go along, but I will answer them at the end. So that's a really good place to store your questions. And if you're having any like technical difficulties, I have Keith on who can help you, you know, like if there's a big blow up of my face and you're not seeing the screen or the slides, or if you can't hear, or if you're having a hard time with the poll or whatever it might be, you can put those questions in there. And then also as questions come up during the webinar about the topic, about histamine overload, you can put those in the question and answer area as well. And then there's also a chat box, and the chat is really what that is for. It's for chatting. So if you want to add a comment that you're wanting to share with the group, maybe a personal experience or just a high five or anything. So that's more for chit chat. But don't worry, if you actually put a question in the chat area, that's okay. We're having that monitored, and so we will we'll harvest those out of there. Okay. So we're at 5:02, so we're going to get started. So I want to make sure everybody can see those slides that are up. If you can't see the slides, please drop something in the chat that says, I don't see your slides. And then hopefully you can also just see a small little box with my face in it. So that's me. I'm Carly. So we're going to get started. So here we go. So tonight you have found yourself at managing your haywire histamine. And if you have symptoms of haywire histamine, you know why I call it haywire, because they're so wild, they're so nebulous, and it feels like your body is haywire. And so we're going to talk today about how to manage that. And I've got a lot of solutions for that. So I'm glad that you're here to join with me. So as a disclaimer, by the way, this is not intended as medical device. So this is for educational purposes only. It's holistic in nature. It's not offered as a complete or comprehensive training on all subjects. So this is not the end all be all recommendations or answers to all your questions. Some of these things haven't been evaluated by the FDA or any other medical body. And it's not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. So we're not diagnosing anything tonight, and we're not treating anything tonight. Okay, you guys probably already knew that. Okay, this is me. I'm Carly Newbert, and I love this picture of myself because it's hilarious. And you see that I have lemons over my eyes. And what do we do with lemons? So lemons are a little bit sour and unpleasant. But if we add a little bit of sweetness to them, then we end up with lemonade. And I've had plenty of opportunities in my life to have lemons and to have the opportunity to add a little bit of sweetness and to make lemonade out of lemons. And I'm guessing that you, since you're on here tonight, have had that same opportunity, because I know that histamine intolerance is not a diagnosis that you get the first time you go to the doctor, right? You don't walk in and the doctor says, oh, I have the answer to all your problems, all of these symptoms that you've been having for years and maybe decades. It's histamine intolerance and mast cell activation. I got you covered, right? So I know that you have had probably a very long health journey, as I have had. And so with my big lemon eyes, I see you, I validate that, and I recognize that you guys are the troopers, right? You are the ones that continue to go the extra mile to figure out how to address these symptoms that you're having. So thank you for being on here. A little more seriously, I am a certified nutritionist. I went to BYU and also Hawthorne University. I'm a certified health coach, and I have other educational things listed here. My husband and I, Keith, and I own healthyhabitsliving.com, and that's probably how you got to this webinar. And you can read and also watch a video more about my health journey and some parts of my health journey on that website. And you can also find information about my personal and private coaching that I do at cleancoachcarly.com. And my last educational triumph there is that I am a graduate and current student of the School of Hard Knocks. And I'm sure that many of you are graduates and continuing education students for the School of Hard Knocks. Besides that, all of those educational things that I have, I am me. I am a teacher, a mentor, a yearner, a lover, an earner, a thriver, and a survivor, just like you are. So here's my goals for tonight, and see if these kind of coincide with some of the goals that you might have for this webinar tonight. So first and foremost, I hope that you feel a sense of connection. You know, in the era of COVID, I know, feel very distant from each other. And I know from being a person with a chronic illness and several chronic illnesses for most of my life, that I can feel very lonely. I have my tissues. And so I hope that you feel a sense of connection, that you really are not alone in the symptoms and maybe the health journey that you've experienced thus far. And also that you're not a medical anomaly. So just because your local doctor or maybe the 10 doctors that you've seen don't know how to address your symptoms and don't know how to put the puzzle pieces together, it doesn't mean that there aren't other people like you. You may not know people like you, and your doctors or practitioners may not know other people like you or how to diagnose you or how to help you, but it doesn't mean you're a medical anomaly. There are other people like you. And so I hope that you feel a sense of connection. And I also hope that this webinar brings some more knowledge to you. And so you feel like you're connecting some dots and putting some pieces together in your years-long health journey or decades-long health journey. And so I hope that you recognize some of these symptoms that maybe you've had are either caused by too much histamine or mast cell activation, or are a result of too much histamine or mast cell activation. And I am trying to instill hope in you, hope for an improvement of your symptoms and even possible resolution of some of your symptoms. And I know that's possible because I've seen it in my own life. And I've been studying the experts that are working with mast cell activation, and they are seeing resolution of symptoms. And then more practical, my fourth goal for you and myself is direction. I'm wanting to give you a sense of direction, where to start with mast cell activation and histamine intolerance, and where not to start. I'll definitely tell you where not to start, and where to go next after that. And then lastly, I'm going to give you some tools, very practical action steps that you can put into use tonight. Okay? So those are my goals for tonight, and hopefully they're going to coincide with some of your hopes and desires for being on this webinar tonight. So we had a couple more people join us, so welcome, thank you for being here. So let's take this quiz. So let's take a couple minutes for this. I'm looking at my time here, so I'll give you like 1 to 2 minutes. And this is a histamine intolerance test. So it's a quick quiz. So you rate yourself 0 if you never, within the last 30 days, we're looking at 30 days here. So you would rate yourself as a 0 if you never experienced the listed symptom. And then on the opposite, you would list or rate yourself with a 4 if you are experiencing that always. So the last 30 days and even beyond the last 30 days. So for example, let's take joint discomfort. So that hasn't been a problem for me for quite a while, but actually within the last 30 days, I've had a couple of flare-ups of that. And so I was experiencing that maybe once a week in the last 30 days. So I'd rate myself at a 2 on that. So just take a minute here on that. And once you have your score, no rush, we're going to give it another minute, but once you have your score, I want you to go into this poll here and give yourself a little score there. So can everybody see that poll? Did the poll come up for you guys? If it didn't, drop it in the chat that you can't see the poll. Oh, I haven't launched it yet. Here we go. There we go. Okay. So it looks like the results are coming in here. We've got about half of our group here has reported. So just give it about 20, 30 more seconds to report your results of your histamine intolerance quiz. Okay, looks like we're waiting for 2 more people. Just give it another couple seconds. So far, okay. All right, we're going to end our poll here, and I'm going to share the results. Okay, so 11 to 23, which is moderate histamine intolerance, 93% of our friends here on the webinar are in that moderate histamine intolerance, okay? So it's estimated that about 50 to 65% of people are going to experience some level of histamine intolerance. But over 50% of people with chronic illness are going to experience moderate to severe histamine intolerance. Okay, so in other words, it doesn't really matter what kind of chronic illness you have. Out of every 2 people, at least 1 is going to have mast cell activation or histamine intolerance as a secondary issue or as a primary issue, along with whatever other chronic illness you're experiencing. So that's pretty significant. And so I'm glad that we have more experts in the field, and this is a topic that we're talking about more often. Okay, if you're new to mast cell activation and you need a little bit of an overview here. So histamine intolerance is when you and I have too much histamine in our bodies and it's not being broken down by the Dao enzyme. And so too much histamine causes a lot of symptoms. It causes more than just a rash or red skin, right? So we'll go over some more of those symptoms, but that is what histamine overload or intolerance is. It's not an allergic response. Okay, so when we have an allergic response, that's histamine, and then it goes away. But histamine intolerance is when we have way too much histamine and the system is overloaded by that. Mast cell activation syndrome, MCAS. You may or may not have been diagnosed with this, but this is where we have allergic symptoms a lot without allergies. So we go and we're tested for various allergies. We don't have them. They don't come up. But yet we're still having allergic-like symptoms all the time to various things. And that's because our mast cells are overstimulated. They're in the go position all the time, pedal on the gas, always releasing histamine and whatever else they release. And they release about 1,000 different molecules and chemicals. So histamine is only one of them. So constantly in overdrive, and mast cell activation causes other symptoms and syndromes and disorders. And it is also caused by many other symptoms and disorders. We'll talk about that a little bit. And then, like I mentioned, the DAO enzyme. So that's the enzyme that your own body makes to break down histamine. So that's a natural process in the body. But you can also take DAO as a supplement, and we'll talk about that. Okay, so let's see. Let's do a quick quiz. Poll number, oh, we already did poll number 1. We're good. Okay. So when we talk about histamine intolerance, again, this is not an allergy. It's sometimes called a pseudo allergy because we have all the signs and symptoms of an allergic response or allergic reaction. But yet when we go to the doctor and we get tested for food allergies or environmental allergies or pet allergies, we don't show up with IgE reactions, okay? Because other cells are involved. These are not IgE cells, these are mast cells and histamine, which is a totally separate issue. And here's some of the things that can contribute to mast cell activation, which we end up with too much histamine. So immune challenges, poor nutrition, hormone imbalances, negative emotions, we'll talk about that tonight. Histamine is released because of emotional stress, chemicals and toxins, inhalant allergies, so seasonal allergies, normal histamine that's produced in your body, and consumed histamines, the things that you eat. So let's do a little science lesson on what histamine is, understanding the science of histamine intolerance. So like I said, histamine is a molecule that your own body makes, and it's actually considered a neurotransmitter. So that means it affects your brain and is somewhat made in your brain. So it's either made in your brain or in your gut. It's made both places. In 1932, it was recognized that when someone had an anaphylactic shock, so in other words, their throat closed up and they couldn't breathe and their skin turned red, that was histamine causing that. So we didn't know that until 1932. And histamine molecules in your body, they have 4 ports or doors that they go through. And those are their receptors. So there's H1, 2, 3, and 4. And so they have a lot of places to bind to in your body. They have a lot of receptors. Histamine is neutralized, like I said, by DAO, diamine oxidase. And that's when it's outside of your cells. So when it's in your gut or in your bloodstream, that's you use the diamine oxidase to neutralize it or break it down. When it's inside your cells, it is neutralized by histamine N-methyltransferase. Well, there's no supplement that you can take that's histamine N-methyltransferase. So we're not going to talk too much about that because that's a whole nother topic. But you can increase your N-methyltransferase, but again, that's another topic. We'll get there. Okay. So let's see. There we go. So what are the symptoms that are created by too much histamine? Well, we know that, when we get a bug bite, it turns red, it gets hot, et cetera, et cetera. But what about if you have too much histamine overload all the time? And that's what we're talking about. So here are some of the symptoms. So migraines and headaches have been linked to too much histamine, nausea and vomiting, circadian rhythm disruption, so not being able to sleep, body regulation, body temperature regulation, locomotion, so your coordination, your learning, your memory, so brain fog. Also diarrhea, when you get to the GI tract, a lot of times too much histamine is going to cause diarrhea. which is usually associated with IBS, right? That's when we get IBS and we don't know why we have diarrhea all the time. That has been linked to too much histamine, stomach cramps. And what's interesting is when we get the too much histamine in the digestive tract, our gastric acid secretions go up. So in other words, we get too much stomach acid at one time. Maybe overall we don't have enough stomach acid, but at one time we're getting too much. And so then we go on to take, Pepcid AC or Prilosec or Tagamet or whatever. And although those help at the moment, they're not a long-term solution for mast cell activation because they don't cure the problem. They just help the symptom. And by the way, no judgment here, no shame if you're taking those, which I'm actually taking one of them. We do what we need to in order to get by so we can get to the sources of what's really causing the overactive mast cells. But, if we're not taking the supplements or doing the lifestyle or whatever it is to help us relieve those symptoms, there's no way we can address those root causes. So no judgment. Whatever medication you're on, no judgment here. Okay, so down in the uterus, you can see that too much histamine affects our hormones. So we get estrogen dominance, overriding of estrogen, too much estrogen, not enough progesterone. We also get, it's not listed here, but severe PMS because that's a lack of progesterone. And we get amenorrhea or dysmenorrhea, so irregular periods or no periods for unknown reasons. Okay? And that is often mast cell activation, too much histamine. And then you probably recognize in the respiratory tract, right? We have congestion of the nose for no good reason, right? We have no infection in there and we've tested negative for seasonal allergies, but yet we have chronic rhinitis or phlegm, we're phlegmy. So mucus secretions go up. And then on your skin, you've got urticaria and pruritus. That's just a fancy way of saying itchiness and hives. Those are just medical terms. And we get flushing in the skin. And we're like, why am I turning red? And it's because you've either breathed something in or something has touched your skin or you've eaten something and your mast cells have just released tons of histamine. And then in the cardiovascular system, we have anaphylaxis, right? When we stop breathing, obviously that's a severe histamine response. We have hypotension and hypertension. So this kind of goes together with EDS and POTS, if you're familiar with those. Where you can't keep your blood pressure up. And then when the blood pressure is up, it's very high and the pulse is very high. So that has been linked to mast cell activation as well. So you can see that mast cell activation isn't just, a little red hive now and again, right? It is chronic symptoms that are throughout the entire body. So again, no judgment. You taken any of these medications, no judgment here, right? These are really good to address the symptoms. They're not addressing the cause, but they are addressing the symptoms. So the question is, when you're having all these symptoms, is your body trying to warn you about something? And if it's trying to warn you about something, what is it trying to warn you about? So we all have cars, I'm assuming. And when you get in the car and one of these lights comes on the dashboard, you're like, okay, I better take care of this, right? You don't just put tape over it so that you don't see the warning light. Okay? And what's interesting is that sometimes when we get symptoms in our bodies, just like when we see a light on the dashboard, we're not exactly sure what that means. So for example, on my graphic here on the top left, the red circle, I don't know what that means. I would need to do some research to figure out what that means on my car. And the same thing with the bottom, the middle, that green with the circle and it looks like a shoe. I don't know what that means. I got to figure out what that means. And so often we'll have symptoms in our bodies and we don't know what those mean. And it's our job to figure it out. So when we have these symptoms of too much histamine, what are the causes? Okay, so we know that we have these symptoms. We know that it can be caused by a lot of things. But there's two main things. So the first is, if you have too much histamine, it can be caused by mast cell activation syndrome. Okay, well, what causes mast cell activation syndrome? What makes your mast cells overproduce? Well, there's many causes for that. So we'll get into those in the next slide. The other main cause of too much histamine is not enough DAO enzyme in your body. So that's either because of your diet, you're eating way too much histamine and your body can't keep up, or genetics, maybe you just don't make enough DAO. So not enough DAO is one cause of mast cell activation syndrome, but there's many causes of mast cell activation syndrome. So if you have too much histamine and you think it's caused by your mast cells, as opposed to just, oh, I don't have enough DAO, here's all of the things that we know can cause your mast cells to be haywire, to be overproducing histamine all the time, go, go, go. So I've underlined SEERS, biotoxin, mold exposure illness. Here's why I have underlined that. Mast cell activation syndrome and histamine overload is a relatively new topic. I believe the diagnostic criteria came about in 2007, so maybe like 13 years ago. So before that, nobody was talking about mast cell activation syndrome. That was not even a thing. It wasn't even recognized. Now it's actually a clinical diagnosis. And so over the past 13 or so years, the experts in this field have been saying over and over again that mold illness seems to be a main cause of overactive mast cells. So there's no studies yet because this is such a new field of interest and new diagnosis, relatively new diagnosis. But the experts in this field are saying, by and large, they're seeing that people with mast cell activation syndrome, they got those overactive mast cells because of a mold exposure. Okay, and so that's, your doctor might have diagnosed you with SEERS, biotoxin illness, mold exposure illness. They're all kind of the same thing. The second kind of leading cause is of overactive mast cells is SIBO or dysbiosis. SIBO is small intestinal bowel overgrowth. So when you eat your food, you chew, you swallow, goes into your stomach, and then into your small intestines or your small intestinal bowel. Okay, so when we get an overgrowth of flora or an undergrowth of good flora in there, this is a main trigger for mast cell activation. Well, how do we get SIBO? Well, one of the ways is mold exposure. Okay, so this kind of ties into this circle here, right? And SIBO causes leaky gut. Okay, so leaky gut is a little down the chain, right? So if you got leaky gut, then you probably have SIBO, and if you have SIBO, you may have gotten it from a mold exposure. So you kind of follow it up the chain. But then there's a bunch of other things, right, that we know cause mast cell activation. So I've highlighted over here lowered production of DAO enzyme, right? So that is one cause of mast cell activation. We've also got all these vitamin deficiencies, gluten intolerance, genetic SNPs, low methylation in your liver, which can be because of any disease state, really, completely not interacting with mast cells, but can be just any liver illness or disease, any infection, DAO blocking foods, inflammation in your digestive tract, right? So your digestive disorders can be a cause for mast cell activation and also can be a result of mast cell activation. And then you have all these medications that some of them are actually used to help mast cell activation and histamine overload symptoms. So they're used to help the symptoms, but yet they can contribute to that vicious cycle of your body creating too much histamine. So now that we know a lot of the things that contribute or cause too much histamine or cause our overactive mast cells, let's run another poll and tell me what you have been diagnosed with. So let's see, poll number 2. I'm not sure if it's going to allow you to choose more than one. So if it allows you to choose more than one and you've been diagnosed with more than one, go ahead and click more than one. But if it's only going to allow you to choose one, then tell me which one is your worst one. We've got some seasonal allergies coming through, digestive disorders. Someone dropped me a note in the chat that tells me whether or not it's allowing you to choose more than one box. What does it say, Keith? Oh, good. I'm glad it's allowing you to choose more than one box. That gives us a lot of good information about each other. That's great. I'll just give you about 10 more seconds. I'm going to drop any more info in there. Oh, we've got several people reporting other. Let's see, let's end this here. Okay, so by and large, we have people diagnosed with histamine intolerance and overload, seasonal allergies, and digestive disorders. And so you'll notice there, there we go, I'm sharing those with you guys. You'll notice that mast cell activation syndrome, only one person has actually been diagnosed with that. And like I said, that's a fairly recent diagnosis that's, you know, acceptable in the medical world. And so I'm not surprised that a lot of people haven't been diagnosed because it's just so new compared to many other things. Okay, so I'm going to close that out and I'm going to give you the cliff notes on myself here. So thank you for sharing with me, you know, the things that you've been diagnosed with. Here's a list of the things that I've been diagnosed with. I won't go over all of them, but you probably recognize a lot of them. You know, some of them are from our poll, but I'm guessing that you know, we have a lot of kindred spirits in our group or people that have had very similar experiences. So here's all of the diagnoses that I have received. And, you know, I put depression and anxiety first because when I first started my health journey, those were the only physical diagnoses that I had. And that's a long story that we won't go in today, but perhaps some of you have had that initial issue as well, that you were diagnosed with a mental illness and had to kind of fight to get to a place where those physical symptoms were actually recognized and diagnosed. And again, I know what a hard journey that is. And so I honor you for staying the course. So these are all the things that I've been affected with in my life. And, you know, I was actually doing pretty well. I had been able to resolve a lot of symptoms by dealing with the Lyme disease that I had and the mold exposure that I had. And we had moved to Reno, Nevada. And one of the reasons I wanted to move here was because it's warmer here. And I felt that, you know, every time I went somewhere warmer that my overall my symptoms had improved. And so, you know, we moved here. What I didn't foresee in moving to Reno was that there is a lot of wind here. There's a lot of seasonal allergies because we're in the desert and the wind blows all the spores around, and we have a lot of different sage brushes, so more than one type of sagebrush blowing around all the time. And then we're in a valley where when the Northern California is on fire, all of the smoke settles down, comes over the Sierras and settles down in Reno. And as I lived here for the first year or so, I recognized that those influences were affecting me dramatically. So I was having a lot of fatigue and a lot of allergy-like symptoms. And so, of course, I thought, well, I better go get checked for seasonal allergies, right? So, of course, I did that. And I'm guessing that many of you have done the same thing. And I got poked all over my back and on my arm. And nothing came back. I wasn't allergic to anything, but yet I was having allergic-like reactions all the time. And so I thought, well, you know, I've had a history of Lyme disease and mold exposure, and I have hypothyroidism and la, 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 la. So it must just be my immune cells, right? My immune cells just don't work that well. That's just the way I am. And you know, one of my doctors has suggested mast cell activation. You know, okay, yeah, that, you know, probably. But overall, I was doing the best I'd ever done in my life. You know, I was able to work full time and manage my stress. And I had this pituitary adenoma, pituitary growth that was affecting my hormones. And I was kind of keeping a handle on that. And, you know, we were doing okay. And then in 2019, I had a stressful project I was working on, and my dog of 17 years, 16 years, who was my only child and my only fur child, her health started to fail. And, I was kind of starting to feel more run down more often. And then of course, during the summer, the forest fires came, and that was really hard on me, even though I'm not allergic to smoke, right? No positive allergy test there. And then, my life just exploded, I guess is what I would say. I love this picture because it's just a great representation of, I think, what often happens to many of us when we experience whatever it is that kind of throws us over the edge. So, in the middle here, you see the flame, right? The fire is right in you and right on you. But then the smoke and the darkness seems to radiate out and just keeps creating waves of suffering, really. And so this is what I experienced. Here comes the tears again. The water works. When my dog passed away. So, like I said, she was our only child, our only fur baby. And I was not equipped to deal with the grief that came with that. And I remember about 4 weeks, maybe, after she'd passed away, I remember saying to my husband, something has happened in my brain, something has changed, and I don't know what to do about it. And I'll always remember that moment because it was really telling for me and kind of led me on a different path of education that I'll tell you about. So shortly after we lost little Rio, the new year came. So we're in January of 2020, and I got COVID. It wasn't called COVID then, right? Because COVID wasn't a thing until March, right? So all I knew was I got a flu that was I was incredibly sick. I was very, very sick. I couldn't breathe. I had no energy. I kept getting fevers for almost off and on for about 3 months. And so during that time, I thought, what is going on here? I must have had a resurgence of the Lyme. The Lyme must be active again, or I've had a mold exposure. And so, as you guys probably know, because you've gone through difficult diagnoses, it takes a while. And Lyme disease especially, you get these specialized tests, and they're, $600 to $1,000, and then you go to see the specialist and, somebody that's Lyme literate and mold literate. And I went and saw I didn't see him in person, but by Skype, I saw Dr. Filaday at the Amen clinics because I had gotten some brain scans as well, and basically told me, Carly, you're not positive for Lyme anymore. That's still dormant. Your immune system's taking care of that. And I'd done the test in my house to make sure I didn't have a mold exposure and that I wasn't excreting mold in my urine, because that's a symptom of mold toxicity. And he said, but your scans show evidence of your head injuries, which I've had several, but they also show that your amygdala is hyperfused, so too much blood going to your amygdala. And at the Amen clinic, they call that limbic ADD. So I already knew I had ADD, but he said that your limbic system is contributing to a lot of your physical symptoms. And that was really a powerful moment for me, because I have, for the past 20 years, been following my physical symptoms and have fought to get my Lyme diagnosis and my mold toxicity and to deal with those things, as opposed to settling for, oh, it's all just in your mind. But he told me a lot of your symptoms are coming because your brain is disordered, is unhealthy right now. And so that really launched me into a year, actually 2 years, really, of learning how to move from the physical to the psychic. So like I said, I've always been rooted in, what's the genesis? What is the beginning of these physical symptoms? And how do I address these? And so I learned about trauma. And, you know, this is a big topic in positive psychology right now and on the internet. And so you can find tons of information about this. This isn't esoteric, you know, this is a big topic right now. But how trauma affects our physical bodies and how the memories of that get trapped literally in the synapses of the brain and affect the way that our brains work. And the way our brains work affects the way our body works. I learned a lot about the vagus nerve, polyvagal theory, the nervous system, and the limbic system. Those are two separate systems. So I'm not going to go into that too much today, but that will be my next webinar. So 3 years ago, if you would have said, Carly, I want to be your client and my diagnosis from my doctor is mast cell activation, I want you to help me manage it, I would have said, okay, great. Number one, we got to dial in your diet. Okay, I'm an expert at all the diets. I'm going to help you, you know, so-and-so client, to get on this low histamine, no histamine diet and leaky gut diet. And then secondly, I'm going to work with you on finding the causes, you know, either on our own or with your practitioner. And then third, okay, let's work on your nervous system. Let's make sure you know how to handle your stress, you know, and you'll have a lot less stress after you're not sick. Okay, so that's what I would have said 3 years ago. But now I would say you need to address your nervous system regulation. And that doesn't mean you have to turn into a meditator who goes out into a cave or into the forest, you know, 5 days out of 7. You don't have to master your nervous system and become, you know, a Buddhist Zen monk walking around in a robe all the time. But you do need to develop the skills that will help you manage your nervous system. And the science is emerging to show that that is more efficacious and you will get better results from that than the diet and the causes and addressing the causes. And I'm here to tell you from learning from the experts and in my own body that the diet can drive you crazy because, as you probably know, it's fairly restrictive. But you can do the diet 100% and you're still going to get mast cell reactions if your nervous system is off, if you don't have the skills to manage your nervous system. So 3 years ago, I would have told you on the left, diet causes a nervous system. Today, I'm telling you, do not start with the diet. It will not serve you enough. You need to start with your nervous system. Okay, here is what I would have felt 3 years ago. And I'm guessing that some of you might feel this way today. You're saying in your mind, with a little anger, how can I be calm and master my nervous system when I have all these physical symptoms? Or I can't relax until I feel better. Or my symptoms are not in my mind, they're in my body. So here's the poll. Who feels this resistance? Who is thinking this right now? I'm going to put this up. You can tell me if you've thought this way or if you're thinking this way right now. And no judgment here, right? Because I have felt this way for a long time. Okay, one person is telling me the truth here that they feel this way. And I'm guessing that the 5 people that are saying I feel this way are in their minds rolling their eyes at me right now, like, oh my gosh, really? Master my nervous system, become a monk? I'm with you. I hear you. I see you. I feel it. And honestly, if I hadn't been studying the science of it, I wouldn't buy into it. But I'm telling you, the science is there. And I'm telling you, it worked for me. And it's working for a lot of other people. Okay, 8 people actually are saying, hey, I'm convinced that I need to start with my nervous system. Okay, so 5 of you, thank you for your honesty. I hear you, I see you, I feel you, I do. And I'm going to keep telling you that your nervous system is your best bet. It's your best bet. It's your best place to start. It's your freest place to start. In other words, it's free. Okay, and working on your nervous system is going to benefit you in other ways as well. So it's a, multitasking thing. Okay. So next webinar, nervous system hacks for your Haywire histamine. So of course, I'm going to tell you how to hack your nervous system, because if that's where you need to start, I'm going to tell you how to do it. I'm going to tell you the science of how your emotions and how you deal with your thoughts absolutely affects your mast cells. I'll go over the science of that. And I will go over my top 3 strategies that I use for dealing with my nervous system. And I'll tell you a bunch of other ones that are backed up by science that I may or may not have tried, but what is being commonly used out there. But I will share with you the three that I personally think are best and backed up by science. That's very important to me. So that webinar is May 26th, 5 p.m. And Keith is going to drop the link to register for that webinar in the chat. So if you want to click on that now, you can just open up a window. And when we get off the call, you can register for that. So now that you know what not to do not start with the diet because it'll drive you crazy and you'll still get reactions. I'm not saying, don't follow some of the principles and start easing that into your program, but don't think that you're going to master the diet first and that's going to be your best solution, because it's not. So I want to give you a couple of easy steps to follow here, some easy things to do that you can start right away. So I talked about the DAO enzyme. So remember, your body makes DAO enzyme, but you can also take it as a supplement because your body may not be making enough DAO enzyme because of genetics or because your body is making so much stinking histamine that your body can't keep up with the enzyme production, okay? So when you take a DAO enzyme supplement, you take it 15 to 20 minutes before you eat. And that way, when the food gets into your small intestines, your gut, that DAO enzyme is there to break down the histamine so that it doesn't get through your leaky gut. This is a picture of a healthy gut, but many of us have leaky guts where those cells on the top are spread apart. That histamine gets right into the bloodstream because the gut is leaky. And then you get all these food reactions and intolerances. Whereas if you have that DAO enzyme in the gut already from taking a supplement, you're going to cut down on the amount of histamine. So that's an easy thing to do, right? If you have gut symptoms of too much histamine, you want to take the DAO enzyme. So Histamine Manager, that's what Histamine Manager is. It is just the same as DM Labs, raw ingredient. 1 capsule is 10,000 HDU, same as DM Labs. 2 capsules is 20,000 HDU. Okay, so here's my question. Who is already taking a DAO supplement, whether it's Histamine Manager or something else? Let's see. I'm going to open up this poll here. So if you're taking it, you're already taking it, how many capsules are you taking per meal? And if you're not taking it, that's fine, because you may not have gut symptoms. I think most people have gut symptoms. Okay, so 8 people actually are reporting that they don't take DAO. So this might be something that you want, or if you're not having any gut symptoms, maybe it's not something you need. Okay, so we'll end our polling here. So it looks like 3 people are taking 1, so 23% are taking 1 per meal, 8% are taking 2 per meal, and 9 people, 69%, are not taking DAO at all. Okay. So Histamine Manager, again, is the DAO enzyme that your body may or may not be making enough of. And so when you take it before you eat, when the food gets into your small intestines, your gut, that enzyme is already there to break down any histamine in your food or any histamine released as you digest your food. And so this is going to cut down on your gut histamine symptoms. So here's what I recommend. I recommend you start with 1 capsule per meal, and I think that a majority of people were doing that. I've found that most people do best with 2 capsules with each meal. I've heard of people increasing up to 4 caps per meal, especially when they're having a lot of gut symptoms like a flare-up or gut symptoms in general. And here's the interesting thing, the dosing is not specifically determined by your height or your weight or your age. It's determined by what you've eaten and how much your body is able to make DAO. So there's no, recommended dose for your age, weight, height, but always right before you eat. If you wait till you eat, the enzyme's not going to be there for the full time that the food is in your gut, because your gut's going to empty. and it's going to have perhaps already let go of some histamine. So that's an easy one. Take the DAO enzyme supplement, histamine manager. There's a couple of studies, we won't go into those today. So what about your mast cells in general, if you want to stabilize them so that they stop making so much histamine for various causes, right? Not just because of not enough DAO, but because of hormone imbalances, or because of medication you take, or because you have Lyme disease or a bacteria, or whatever reason your mast cells are on, you know, power drive all the time. So we talk about stabilizing the mast cells with nutrients. So all of these nutrients, and particularly the quercetin, boswellia, nettle, and NAC, are known mast cell stabilizers. So obviously this is recommended usually for people that have seasonal allergies, because seasonal allergies have a mast cell component. But this is something I recommend for anybody who has unstable mast cells, too much histamine, mast cell activation syndrome. I recommend on this guy 4 capsules per day, and I recommend 2 in the morning, 2 at night. And I will often take higher doses when I'm having a flare because of wind, because of smoke, or other symptoms, body aches. Okay. And then the final easy step, the final supplement is TerraFlora. So why are we taking probiotics? Well, remember I said that most people got their mast cell activation because of a mold exposure, and in general, they have SIBO, small intestinal bowel overgrowth. And how do we get rid of SIBO? Well, if you've done any studying about that, you know it's very hard. There's a lot of factors at play, and you don't just take an antibiotic, because that SIBO got there somehow. Okay, so there is an underlying cause for that SIBO. So how do we fix it in a holistic way? Well, we take soil-based or spore-based probiotics. They're the same thing, soil-based, spore-based, same thing. And this is the one I like, TerraFlora. The reason I like it is because they're using the 5 most studied strains of spore-based probiotics. So is it 5? Yeah, it's 5. Not these kind of esoteric ones that we don't know a lot about, but these are the ones that have been studied by the Human Microbiome Project and shown to be the most prevalent in a healthy human gut. And then you'll notice also that there's a prebiotic formula in here. Prebiotics are food for probiotics. So it's great to take those in the same capsule so that you're feeding the probiotics once they get into your system. So that's a $49 value retail. So I recommend that you titrate up on the soil-based probiotics, because if you don't, and you have SIBO, you're likely to get some unpleasant symptoms. So I recommend 1 capsule at night. So if you're getting any symptoms, you're going to sleep through it. And then that's for a week. And then the next week you do 1 in the morning, 1 at night. And then on that 3rd week, you do 2 at night. So you're getting a higher dose at one time. So my offer for you guys tonight for coming on this webinar and learning about what you can do to deal with your mast cell activation. You can use histamine. That's the code at checkout, histamine. And you can buy all 3 of these supplements for $125. That's about $30 off. And that offer is good for the next 72 hours. And this, again, this is my easy step for you. This is something that's like, okay, I know this is going to help in the long run. This is pretty easy. I can take a couple supplements and start my journey here, or continue your journey here. Another option is that if you are somebody who has a lot of gut symptoms and you're taking a lot of the DAO, I can give you 20% off of 2 bottles or more of the Histamine Manager, and the code is webinar20. Now remember, Histamine Manager, the DAO enzyme, it's not a cure. Okay, it only works in your gut, but it will decrease your symptoms so that you can have a little more quality of life and a little more clarity as you get to these root causes of why these mast cells are so overwhelmed and overloaded. So I hope that through this discussion, this presentation, that you've seen the fulfillment of some of my goals for you tonight. I hope that you feel that you're not alone. You're not a medical anomaly. Just because a doctor or many doctors maybe have not been able to help you doesn't mean you're the only person that is suffering from this set of symptoms, right? We give these symptoms a name because that empowers us to be able to put our finger on it and say, this is what's going on and this is what I'm going to do for it. So you're not alone. I hope that you've gotten some answers and been able to kind of find your symptom subset of mast cell activation and been able to tie some of maybe your other diagnoses in and recognize why you have so much histamine and you have so many symptoms. And of course, I have tried to instill a sense of hope for you, hope for improvement, hope for resolution, and a direction. So where to start, where not to start. Don't try to master the diet. That's not going to be your winning ticket. And I've given you some tools. So your tool is start to work on your nervous system. And of course, you can do that on your own. And I would invite you to attend my free webinar. I will be giving, obviously, the tools that helped me the most and that have been the most clinically researched. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that are on the topic of mast cell activation and histamine imbalance. Obviously, we're not going to talk about the nervous system too much or medications or anything like that, but anything we discussed tonight, any questions that we have. So I'm looking over here at my questions. So this is a great question. So does the DAO help with MCAD if you don't have gut symptoms, or does it only help with gut symptoms? So that's a great question. So we know that it will help with other symptoms. It's not going to help as much. Okay, so so for example, if you get hives or splotchiness or redness when you eat, that's not a symptom that's in your gut, but we know that it's starting in your gut. Okay, and so in that case, the DAO supplement is absolutely going to help. Okay, but if you get a symptom of every time you walk in the grocery store, you go down the detergent aisle and you smell those detergents and you get a migraine, you can take as much DAO supplement as you want. That is not going to, it's not going to help, because that DAO supplement will not get into your bloodstream outside of your gut. So I hope that answers your question. All right, second question. What would you recommend if you can't tolerate DAO? I've tried to take it, I had a bad reaction. And then tagging on to that, I don't think I'd be able to tolerate any of these supplements. What would you recommend in that case? Okay, so if you can't tolerate DAO, you might have a pork allergy, right? The other thing is that you may need to microdose, which means open up the capsule and use just a little, you stick your finger in your mouth, get a little bit, and you do that and you hold it underneath your tongue. What if you can't tolerate any supplements at all? Guess what I'm gonna say? I'm gonna say you start working heavily with your nervous system. That's the answer. And plenty of science to back that up, right? We're not talking woo-woo like, oh, get down with your primal self and your child. No, I'm talking about the research is there that says when we are able to work on the nervous system, we have less mast cell reactions. Okay, what's our next question here? Should you take the DAO enzyme only with meals that you anticipate may cause symptoms, such as leftover meals? I'm sorry? Oh, leftover meats. Okay, leftover meats and leftover meals. Okay, so it depends on the severity of your reactions. So in general, I'm always going to be someone who's going to tell you to take at least one per meal if you experience gut symptoms at all. And then if you're eating leftover meats or leftover meals in general, which I don't recommend, as you already know, that's not a super good plan, then you're going to want to take even more, right? So if you're somebody that's already on 2, then you're going to want to take 3 or 4 that time. I will not be able to attend the next webinar on May 26th. Can I get a copy of the slides and the discussion? Absolutely. So if you sign up for the webinar and you don't come, I will send you, or automatically Zoom will send you a recording of the presentation, which will obviously include the slides. Yeah, absolutely. I was tested last year for MCAS, and my tryptase is normal. My question is, MCAS a result of having histamine intolerance for a long time? It absolutely can be. Okay, so let's say you didn't have any other issues, no hormone issues, no seasonal allergies, whatever. Let's just say you're eating a high histamine diet all the time, drinking way too much wine, whatever it is, eating salami every night. And so you're overloading your digestive system with histamine. Can that activate your mast cells and cause mast cell activation? Yes, absolutely. And for this person who's asked this question, just because your tryptase is normal does not mean you don't have mast cell activation. So if you've done any studying, you know that the tryptase is not the end all be all test for mast cell. It's one of the best. When we get a positive, we know it's not a false positive, but when we get a negative, we don't know that it's not a false negative. So don't base your diagnosis or thought on you have it or not just on the tryptase. Can you take DAO by itself? Is that the question? Yes, you should take DAO by itself. You want that, you want your stomach to be empty 15 to 20 minutes before you eat. You want no food in there and preferably no other supplements, so that enzyme gets in there, opens up in your small intestines, and it's just waiting for that food to come, and so that it can break down any histamine released or present in the food. Any more questions? Okay. I see 2 questions in the question and answer. Did you, the Q&A, you got those? Okay, just want to make sure that we got everybody answered. So we're right at 6 o'clock. I got to say, I'm pretty impressed that we went exactly 1 hour. I just want to close by telling you, I see you, I honor you, I validate you for whatever health journey that you've had. I mean, I recognize that most people don't get mast cell activation as their primary diagnosis. I recognize that you likely have been from doctor to doctor, practitioner to practitioner, test to test, diagnosis to diagnosis. You've gone into the valley, or I'm sorry, the peak of hope and for resolution of symptoms, and also into the valley of despair and depression when you feel like you've hit a dead end. And so I honor that, and I'm your cheerleader. Keep going and searching and finding the answers, and know that you're definitely not alone, that this diagnosis is growing and that knowledge about it is also growing. And so that leads for more avenues and opportunities for resolution and a cure. So thank you for attending. Again, you can sign up for the webinar. The link is here in the chat, and I'll leave the chat up for a couple minutes. And you do get a free PDF, and I will send that also in the email, in the follow-up email, so that you can have a lot of what we talked about tonight, and even some other things as well. And I always tell all my clients this, that if you never see me again, you never want to talk to me again, I give you all the grace and the strength and the power to find your own path and find your own way. So if you don't want to join me to learn about your nervous system, then I hope and empower you and give you all the space and energy that you need to discover that on your own. So thank you again tonight, and I'm going to sign off, but I will leave the chat open for a few minutes if you want to grab any of those links. Good night, everybody.